So I've tried to keep things light in the midst of everything that is going on around us. And there are weeks when something just absolutely needs to be addressed. But this week, I just thought we'd stop, take a breath, and be joyful. In the midst of all of it, be joyful, because I really do believe that that is where our hope comes from, our strength comes from. And so we're not ignoring what's going on. We're not turning a blind eye, but we're remembering and giving thanks for the goodness that still prevails. They're standing in the ruins, dust on their hands, sweat on their faces. The stones of the old temple, once magnificent, once home, now lie in scattered silence. Exiled for 50 years, this was supposed to be a homecoming. But the city wasn't what they remembered. The temple is only a memory. The joy they imagined feels out of reach. And someone says what everyone's been thinking: it'll never be the same. This is a story that has been told again and again and again, in every generation, in every corner of the world. When the Jewish people returned from Babylon to a Jerusalem in ruins, they stood among the shattered stones just like this. When refugees from Hiroshima and Nagasaki walked through cities turned to ash, when families in Sarajevo came home after the siege to find their neighborhoods silent and hollow, when the people of Aleppo sifted through the rubble of their markets, their schools, and their sanctuaries, when Ukrainians returned to Bucha, Mariupol, and Kharkiv only to find ghosts of what once was, when survivors of Hurricane Katrina, of Gaza, of Sudan, of Maui looked for what could still be saved. The ache is the same. It will never be the same. And yet, that's where resurrection begins. Not in what was, but in what can still rise from what remains. Because every time the world has fallen apart, someone starts to gather stones again. Someone lights a candle. Someone plants a seed in the ashes. Jerusalem was rebuilt, not as it was, but as something new. Warsaw rose again, brick by brick. Black churches in the South rebuilt after the flames. New Orleans sang again, not because the pain was gone, but because the song itself was an act of defiance. And maybe that's what faith has always been. Not blind optimism, but the stubborn belief that love can live again in the ruins, that justice can take root even when the soil still smells of smoke, that people can come home even when home will never look the same. Resurrection isn't about going back. It's about going forward, about standing in the rubble and daring to believe that life still belongs here, that beauty can still be born here, that God still walks among the ruins. A couple of days ago, I read a story on Facebook, and it seems trivial in comparison to all of the pain and the misery and the suffering. But I read a couple of days ago that Mike's Pizza Palace, one of my hometown favorites, was closing after 50 years. The owners said that they hoped to reopen in another location as the building had been sold. But I posted on Facebook, it'll never be the same. And it won't, because it's never just the pizza. It's belonging. It's the booth where you sat with friends after a game, after a play, after a dance. It's the sound of laughter that lingers in the walls. It's the taste of joy that's woven into memory. Because don't get me wrong, while it's never just the pizza, it most certainly is the pizza. That's what the people in Haggai's time were mourning. Not the pizza. Not just a building, but a whole way of life, a center of meaning, a place where they believed that God had lived. And right here, standing in the dust, the prophet Haggai speaks a word from God. Take courage. Work, for I am with you. My spirit abides among you. Do not fear. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. It's an absurd promise, really. The new temple will never match Solomon's. The grandeur is gone, the gold, the power, the crowds, all of it gone. But maybe God is writing a new story. Maybe God is redefining glory. Maybe glory isn't what glitters. Maybe it's what endures. The glory of the latter house isn't about stones or splendor, glitz and glamour. It's about presence. It's about love that stays. It's about the spirit that refuses to leave even when everything else has fallen apart. There's an old story from 1 Samuel. After God helped Israel in battle, the prophet Samuel set up a single stone as a sign of remembrance. He called it his Ebenezer, which means stone of help. It was his way of saying, here, right here, God met us, and God helped us. And from then on, whenever they passed that place, they would remember, thus far, the Lord has helped us. The stones weren't decoration. They were testimony. Markers of joy and gratitude, physical reminders that even in the rubble, God had not abandoned them. Maybe that's what we're called to build too. Not temples of stone and gold, but Ebenezers of joy. Markers of where the Spirit has shown up for us. Places to say, here, God was here. God is still here. And maybe that's what joy really is. Not the loud, shiny, everything's fine kind of joy, but the steady, quiet joy of knowing God still abides. The joy that whispers, even this can be holy. I know some folks lament that the church has changed. They talk about the good old days when the pews were full, when there was a youth group in every church and a church on every corner, when choirs were overflowing, when Sunday schools were bustling. Some miss the old hymns, some miss the Latin Mass. Some just miss the sense that church once mattered more in people's lives. And I understand that. It's grief. Real grief for what used to be. But here's what I see. Joy hasn't disappeared. It's just moved. It's showing up in different forms. It's in the work that we're doing, in the lives that we're touching, in all of the ways that this little congregation is still pulsing with resurrection. It's the joy that returns one small moment at a time. In the shouts of thanksgiving in a refugee camp 9,000 miles away for the possibility of new life. It's in the laughter of children heard daily from the homeschool co-op that meets in our fellowship hall. It's in the smiles of more than 100 kids who came by on Halloween for candy and a hug from Miss Kelly. I swear Kelly knows every kid in Yahats. I saw joy at the pantry this week, even amidst the headlines and the talk of shutdowns and freezes on SNAP benefits. And despite it all, 132 neighbors found food and dignity. And despite record numbers of folks using the pantry, more people brought in food last week than we passed out. I saw it at Don's place, where 5 new guests were met with warmth instead of worry and had their first night of real rest in a long time. I see joy in our kitchen, where volunteers lovingly prepare food for our community dinners. I see it in our flu clinics and blood drives, where sleeves are rolled up and care is shared. I heard it just yesterday in the sound of joy and the music that filled this space during this weekend's Celtic Fest. 5 concerts here in the sanctuary, echoing through these old walls. Joy is here in the ordinary grace of people showing up to feed, to serve, to sing, to rebuild, to love. It's not the joy of what was, but the joy of what's being born right now. The joy that says it's not the same, but that's okay, because the Spirit is still here. That's resurrection. Not the erasing of what was, but the rising of what can be. It happens when a community refuses despair, when hope is rebuilt one act of love at a time. It happens when the future feels smaller than the past, but people keep showing up anyway. And it happens in us too. Every time we rediscover courage, every time we laugh again after loss, every time we choose joy in a world that profits from cynicism. I think about Kelly's 100 Days of Joy challenge, how she's naming one joy each day: a sunrise, a kindness, a color, a song. Not because life is easy, but because joy itself is a way of rebuilding. That's what Haggai is talking about. That's what God meant by take courage. Because joy is courage. Joy is the proof that the Spirit still abides. Joy is how resurrection begins. And maybe that's what's happening among us now. Our congregation isn't standing in ruins. In fact, we're far from it. In spite of all the dire predictions about the fate of the church, we're standing in renewal. And the promise still holds. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. Not because it's bigger or better, not because it looks like it always has, but because it's alive. Because it's filled with people who believe that love can keep creating, who believe that resurrection is not a story we remember, but a story we live. So this morning, we're going to do what God's people have always done when they want to remember that God's help is real. All through Scripture, stones mark the meeting place between heaven and earth. They're the memory keepers of God's people, silent witnesses to promise, presence, and perseverance. Jacob lays his head on a stone and wakes to find the ground beneath him is holy. Moses builds pillars at Sinai to seal a covenant. Joshua stacks 12 stones by the Jordan so that the future generations will ask, what do these mean? Samuel raises an Ebenezer, a stone of help, to remember how far grace has carried them. Stone towers and cairns have always appeared again and again, built not for beauty, but for memory. They are God's people. They are God's people's way of saying, God met us here. When words fade, stones remain solid, enduring, telling the story long after we've gone. So we're going to raise our own Ebenezers, stones of joy and gratitude. As I said, you see tables throughout the sanctuary. There's one here, over here, by the sofa, in the back corner. I ask you to go, pick a stone, hold it for a minute, roll it around in your hands, feel its weight, and think of one word of joy that has carried you lately. Something that reminds you that life is still good, that God is still here. It could be friendship or laughter or music or courage or community, forgiveness or hope. Whatever joy the Spirit brings to your mind. Then write that word, paint that word on your rock. Maybe paint a rainbow or a heart or a flower on it. And then you can go back to your seat, hold your rock, let it dry a little bit, and I'll let you know when to bring that forward and place it on the table here. I thought we could build towers, but I'm not sure if the paint will be dry enough, so we'll play it by ear. And as you place your stone, you might want to whisper your word out loud and let it become part of the sound of this house being rebuilt. So, now's the time to find a table, find a rock, chat with your neighbors. Let's make this a joyous occasion. Maybe Milo can play a little bit of traveling, like painting music. Let's do it. Play our hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, which I always laugh. And when I'm bemoaning the church and why people aren't coming anymore, I'm like, it's because nobody wants to sing about where you laid your Ebenezer. I mean, it seems so archaic. But if you know what an Ebenezer is, and we can attach it to joy and remembering what God has done for us, and thus far God has helped us, and there's no reason to think God is going to stop. So during the singing of this song, as we're singing about Here I Lay My Ebenezer, bring your rocks forward. If they're dry, we can stack them if you want, or just spread them out on the table. But also, we're not passing the plate this morning, so there's a basket here to place your offering in as well. Come